everyone, Eran Stern here with a new episode after a long gap due to family duties. But now I'm back again, and to make up on this long recess, I have a great extended tutorial for you. This time we'll take a close look at my favorite simulation effects, which will help us to achieve this nice liquid pushing effect. This effect, of course, is inspired from many sci-fi movies, from the recent Push movie through The Matrix and way back into its first appearance in The Abyss back in 1989. Just imagine that what once cost millions of dollars to create can now be achieved more or less using a $1,000 software on your desktop. Amazing, isn't it? Well, it is. And we will recreate this effect here inside After Effects using only the built-in tools. And also at the end I'll show you a cool way to color correct your footage to gain some epic look using the color finesse plugin, which some users tend to overlook. But first let's begin with the design of the pulse wave that will fold the air in front of us and generate that watery liquid effect. Our main shot for this lesson is this video of my brother Yuval, who's using his pantomime skills to push the air in our garden. As you noticed, Yuval is very famous for his air pushing skills. Wait, this doesn't sound right, huh? Anyway, he's doing his gig and we'll use this video as the basic layer for building our effects upon. So, I'll drag this video to a new comp and then I'll rename this comp Waves, as this will serve as the displacement source for the push effect. I'll also set the clip opacity in this comp to 30% and then change its blend mode to lighten, and also I will right click on it and choose to enable guide layer. This means that this video will not render and will not show up when we'll use this comp later in our main comp. Basically, we are using it as a guide layer just to mark where and when the action is happening. Okay, the next step is to create a solid layer, and let's name it Wave 1. Make sure it is the same size of the comp. The color doesn't really matter here, and we can choose OK. Now I will drag this under Yuval's act clip and then go to the effects and presets and start to type wave. From here I'll drag the wave world effect and apply it to my solid. By the way, if you're not clear on the whole displacement thing, don't worry about it, it will be very obvious in a moment. Just in a nutshell, what we are aiming for is to create some grayscale map, a grayscale clip, which will then drive the other filter that we will use, which is caustics, to create the liquid flow waves that you see before. The basic idea behind this technique is to understand that neutral gray here means that there will be no displacement at all, while black values, black pixels or white pixels will generate moving pixels in the displacement itself, which means the pixels will move up or down, vertical or horizontal. Okay, let's start to work on it and it will be clear in a moment. Let's begin by changing this working view from wireframe preview to height map. Then I'll raise the grid resolution to 200, which will then render a very high quality result. And you can raise it even to a higher number if you like, but for our example 200 should be more than enough. Now let me just generate a quick RAM preview so you'll see what we have here. There is a pulse wave animation that happens in the middle of the screen, and what we basically need is to place it and time it to the video shot that we have above. So let's open up Producer 1 here in the effect and press on the position target, then drag it to Yuval's hand, and next we need to set the beginning of the animation. So let's go to 1 second and 15 frames here. This is where he starts to lift his hand And here I'll set a keyframe for the amplitude with a value of 0. This means that before this point, nothing will happen on the screen because this value, the amplitude, controls the height of the produced wave. Now, move one frame forward and set it to 0.7. Let's also set an animation for the frequency value, and the frequency value controls how many waves are produced per second. So we'll start here with a value of 5 because we want a lot of waves at the beginning, and then we will reduce it over time. So let's move to say 5 seconds, and here we'll lower the amplitude to 0. And while we're here, let's also change the frequency to 1. Now tap on the 0 in your numpad to generate a quick run preview just to see what we have until now. You can see, of course, that the waves are coming out of the desired point and then they are drifting apart until they disappear around 5 seconds. I'll also set a higher value for the damping, which specifies how quickly the energy of the wave is absorbed by the liquid it travels through. Let's set it to 0.2, so it will be a little quicker than the default. And now, just to be on the safe side, let's also add a fade out to the whole layer. So starting 10 frames later, I'll set two opacity keyframes from 100 to 0% over a second or so. Then I'll press U to see all my keyframes, marquee around them, and press F9 to easy ease the motion. Wonderful! Now we have the basic animation which we can now duplicate and match with the other hand and also with the last action as he returns back to the screen. We'll first attend to the second hand, so duplicate the wave layer by going to the menu or pressing Ctrl or Command D and rename it Wave 2. Now because we want to keep the existing animation, we need to see the layer that is under it. So I'll select the Wave 2 layer and then I will choose for it the Overlay Blending mode. This will lay the wave world effect on top of what we already have. Now I'm quite happy with the settings I have here, so let's just time it and place it in the correct spot over the second hand. So I'll move a few seconds forward and then under Producer 1, I'll drag the position to the middle of his hand. And next I'll press U to show all my keyframes for this layer, select them, and then go to 2 seconds and 14 frames. This is where Yuval just about to lift his other hand, and then I will drag all of my keyframes to start at this point of time. Now just to differ this animation from the previous one, let's open up the simulation category above, and for this instance, I will change the damping value to a very low number, such as 0.015. This will make it more subtle and the movement will be a little bit more calm. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm not using the second producer I have in this effect, it's because if I'll use it, it will create, of course, another water wave, but it will collide with the existing ones, hence giving us more distortion that we need on the screen. I played with it before and I think that for this case it's just too much, so instead of using the second producer we are just duplicating what we already have. So let's see what we have until now. Okay, I know it doesn't look much at this point, but hey, we are far from calling it done. So let's move on to create the third wave by repeating the same principles. Once again, I'll duplicate the solid and then I will press U to see my keyframes. And for this layer, I'll remove the opacity keyframes as we don't need to fade it at the end. Then I'll take the last two keyframes and move them closer to the right so I will have the control I need over them, and then drag the whole keyframes over to the place where Yuval returns to the frame around 8 seconds or so, And here once again we need to reposition the producer position point on his hand. And then we can move to the place where he raises his hand around 7 seconds and 18 frames or so. And once again we'll change a few of the settings to give it more dynamic look. In this case I'll raise the second amplitude keyframe to 0.8. And then I'll make sure the last keyframe is at the end. And I'll set the damping number here to 0.1. So we'll get more energy from this wave towards the end of the animation. Now I know it looks like I'm making only minor adjustments here. However, every tiny change here will reflect quite strongly when this comp will be used as a displacement source. Trust me on this one, I will prove it to you in a minute. For now, let's just scrub the CTI to verify that the last producer that we position is in its right place. And if not, let's just fix it so it will be. And excellent! We are almost done with the boring part. The only thing I want to do here before I'm leaving this composition is to somehow block the distortion in the areas of the hands, of the fingers. At least for the first two touches. For that, let's make sure that nothing is selected, and then we will create a star shape layer. So choose the star tool, go to where Yuval lifts his first hand, and start to draw a star over the hand. Now, when I'm drawing and the mouse is still down, I'll also press the up arrow cursor key, and this will add more points to the shape that I'm drawing. I'll do it roughly until I'm, covering his finger. It doesn't need to be super exact as we only want to obscure the part of this hand. Now, to make it happen, we need to make sure that the color of this shape is set to 50% gray. Remember, a neutral gray will not create any displacement. So press on the color for the layer, and then make sure that the H and the S are set to 0, and the B, which is the brightness, is set to 50%. Also, make sure that the shape has no stroke at all. Now open the transform properties of the star shape and set a few opacity keyframes so it will come and go according to the action you see on the screen. Now select Polystar 1 and duplicate it. And next drag the second polystar on top of the other hand and time the opacity keyframe to match. After you finish with that, let's look for the fast blur effect and apply it to the shape layer. Let's set here a value of around 30 just to blend it to the wave distortions underneath. Once again, I'll remind you that where the value is set to neutral gray, there will be no displacement, and this little treatment will help us to sell the effect much better. So, we finished with the creation of our displacement source, and here comes the exciting part. Now, return to the project panel. And let's drag the waves comp to the make new comp icon to create a composition at the same size and length. I'll rename this comp the pusher and say OK. As you know, we don't see the clip of Yuval because we marked it as a guide layer here. So now we need to drag the main video to this comp and we will place it under the waves layer. For the moment, I'll turn off the eye for the waves layer so we can see what we are doing. And then I'll go to the effects and presets and start to type CAU. From there, I will drag the caustics effect onto Yuval's act layer. These caustics effects simulate caustics, which are the little reflections of light at the bottom of a body of a water or a pool or something. They are created by light which is refracting through the surface of the water. But apart from creating these caustics, This filter is also a fantastic displacement tool which generates reflections and creates realistic water surfaces, especially when used with the wave world effect, which is exactly what we prepared for it. So let's see how it works. We need to adjust what we want to show and what we don't need. In this case, we're not going to use the sky, and we mostly deal with the water and the lightning attributes. First, I'll define the water surface as our waves layer, and also turn the surface opacity down to 0, so we don't have any color cast. Then I'll scroll down to the lighting and change the light type to be a point source. While we are here, let's also open up the material options and dismiss the specular reflection to 0 because the position of the camera is just right in front of us, and I think it will look better this way. Believe it or not, the hard part is behind us. So let's preview now the first few seconds just to see what we've established so far. Okay, this looks very nice, but I doubt it will implant memories and make other people do whatever this pusher wants them to do. It still looks like it needs more adjustments and perhaps some color correction as well. So let's attend to this now. I'll start by adding some highlights and shadow back to the effect. And the easiest way to do it is just to turn on the eye for the waves layer and just set it to the overlay blending mode. This helps a little bit, but we do need to add more contrast by applying the levels filter. And now let's crunch the black and the whites so we'll get more information. And yes, this looks much better, but I'm still missing, the color refractions that this effect is so famous for. So let's try to mimic this phenomenon now. For that, I'll duplicate the waves layer and I will name it waves colors. And to it, I will add the colorama filter. I will also add the CC radial blur filter as well. We'll start with the colorama filter, and I think it can stay with its own defaults, which are mapping the output cycle to this nice rainbow color scheme. However, we do need to crunch the level effects even further as close as we can to this histogram so we can get more colors. You can push this as much as you need, but I think that I will leave it like this. Now we want to blur it a little bit, so let's modify the CC radial blur. I will use a straight zoom type here and then set the amount to maybe 100 just to smear the colors on the screen. Of course, we only want to see these colors where the effect takes place, which means only where we have waves. So we need to limit this layer just to show us only the area that we want it to. I'll do it using a Luma matte trick. So all we need to do is just duplicate the original waves layer and then drag the new copy on top of the current layer, and just for the sake of organization, let's name it waves matte. So just we will know what's going on. Now we will switch the blend mode for it back to normal, and in the levels effect for this layer I will just drag the input black until it almost touches the start of the histogram. Next, I'll select the layer below the waves colors and set it to use the waves matte as a Luma matte layer. If you feel you want to show more colors, you can of course change the input white closer to the graph. This way we are basically controlling the transparency of this layer using the layer above. What shows as black is transparent of course, and what shows as white is opaque. You can scrub to different places on the timeline just to see the effect, and if necessary you can of course fiddle with it more until you get the amount that you need. It's worth to mention that by changing this layer's blend mode you can also come up with even more pronounced effect, But I think that for now I will settle with these settings. If there's a need, we can always visit it later and check other modes. Very good guys, we are almost done and it starts to shape itself. The only thing that I want to do here before sending this to my client for review is to color correct the whole shot. So for the end of this tutorial, we'll create an adjustment layer. We'll name it Color Look. And to it I will apply the Synthetic Aperture Color Finesse 2. Now this is a plugin that comes free of charge with every copy of After Effects since version 6.5. It is a complete color correction environment which opens up in its own interface and gives you a handful controls over your outcome. Since version 2 of these plugins, there is also a simplified interface which won't open a separate window, and this interface holds most of the tools you'll need on a common job. So this is what we are going to use in this case. Let's drill down the controls for it, and you'll find here a three-way color correction tool which allows you to play with the master, the shadows, the midtones and the highlights of your footage, very much like the common color corrections effect that we'll find in most editing systems today. I'll make some room to work here and let's start to push these wheels to your desired location. After all, we are in the pusher tutorial here, aren't we? Okay, so I think that I'll push the midtones towards the orange tint and then I'll go to the opposite direction with my shadows. For the highlight, I'll also add some warm colors and I will do the same for the master colors as well. Oh yes, this looks very nice, but maybe we need to add a little bit of contrast to the shot. So I will scroll down here and open up the curves and I'll set a nice S contrast shape to my image. As I mentioned before, there's a lot here to play with, and if you open up the full interface, you'll see that you can also do secondary color corrections and set up a lot of other parameters as well. Be sure to check the other options here, and as I said, this filter alone deserves its own tutorial, and we might visit it again in the future episode, who knows. But for now, we have what we want for it. So just for good measure, let's also add the glow effect to the mix. I'll add more pixels here to the radius, and I think that I will lower the intensity, and this should even add up more punchiness to the shot. As always, if you feel it's a little bit over the top, you can try to reduce the opacity for this adjustment layer as much as you want. Okay. I think this is it for this one and we are ready to render. So let's do just that and see what we came up with. So what do you say? Do you feel the urge to go and try it yourself? Not yet? Strange. Maybe Yuval isn't such a great pusher as he thinks he is. Of course, from this video we can all tell that he's doing it only for fun, so don't expect any brainwash from this guy. Anyway, I hope you find this technique interesting and useful, and you're going to do something cool with it very soon yourself. Again, I'm not pushing you in any way. Alright, enough with that. This is Eran's turn for CreativeCar.net. And until next time we'll meet, I hope you'll push it real good. Enough, I said, enough.